So, as I said, some of us are been on this particular path of meditation for many years. Some have been maybe trying to get into stride with it, and some of us, I know, are very new to it. What I would like to do now is really talk about what meditation is and how we meditate, and move into a period of meditation. The best way to learn to meditate is to understand the simplicity of it, and that is probably, that might take you 20 or 30 years before the simplicity of it really gets through to you. But even that, in that case, the best way of understanding the simplicity of it is to practice it. And it's a simple practice, it's not complicated. We don't say this is the only way to meditate, or the only way to heaven, but we do know that this is a tried and tested and sacred spiritual practice within the Christian tradition from the dawn of the tradition. And we also know that many men, women and children around the world for many years have found in this discipline, in this simple practice, a very life-enriching and faith-deepening and enlightening and healing practice. So it's out of that tradition and the experience of the community together that we teach it. There are three quite simple, short points I'd like to make before describing the practice. And the first will require a little bit of movement on your part, so don't get too passive, please. Meditation can look very passive, and maybe meditators tend to be a bit on the introverted side. Although I'm not sure that that's true at all, really. I think meditators are pretty well as diverse as any other target group, I think. But probably in their meditators' mode, they tend to be not joiners or organizers so much, or active people so much, although they may well be very active people who have discovered this contemplative dimension of themselves in and through the practice of meditation. So, but I think it's always important to understand that the meditation itself is a kind of a pure action. Although it is a way of being rather than doing. Obviously, when we're meditating, we're not doing the kind of things that we usually think are worth doing, or need to be done, or have to be done. And that can be a problem, because we think we're so busy that there's so many things we've got to do that we don't have the time to meditate. But if we can get over this idea that the way of being is in some way opposed to the way of action, then I think we're well on the way to understanding how meditation leads to wholeness, and to a wholeness that brings being and doing together in our lives. It's always going to be difficult to keep the balance. You're always going to be, to some degree, struggling with finding time for it and integrating it into your life. It's never going to be routine. Nevertheless, it becomes a rhythm, it becomes a good habit, it becomes something that is life-giving in a natural way. You don't have to keep thinking about. So think about it as a kind of pure action. And that's why in the time of the meditation we are doing a work. it's not the kind of work we get paid for, or the kind of work that we complain about doing, or the kind of work that we have to be evaluated on by our bosses. But it is a very real work, and it does bring rewards. It does evaluate itself in terms of your life. You see the fruits of meditation in your daily life and in your work. Perhaps one of the ways most people realize that meditation is changing their lives is at the level of relationships. So, what are your relationships like at the moment? The quality of your relationships probably determines how you think about yourself and your life, whether it's worth living, whether you're enjoying it, whether it's really invigorating. I met somebody today fixing something for me, and a young person, so very stressed, very sad, stressed, good at his work but stressed out in it. And he said I feel even if something really good happened to me, I wouldn't be able to enjoy it. So sad to hear that. And what was lacking, well, one of the things lacking in his life, apart from meditation, was healthy or life-giving and freeing relationships, or an ability to relate to himself, to others, and to God. So relationships doesn't just mean our relationships with significant others, but it means actually the whole nexus, the whole sort of sphere of relationships which make up you and me, beginning with our relationship with ourselves. What do we think about ourselves? Do we like ourselves? Are we in touch with ourselves? Do we think we are much good at anything? Do we think we have any meaning in our lives? And are we getting any real joy out of life? What are you waiting for? And how are you dealing with the past? So, all of those questions that constitute, or some of the questions that constitute our relationship with ourselves. And of course, the basis of our relationship with ourselves is going to determine our relationship with other people. This chap I was speaking to, obviously, I would say, finds it quite difficult to relate to people because he's in such a sad place in his relationship with himself. Feels life is passing by. He said, how quickly life passes. Shouldn't be thinking that at his age. So, our relationships with ourselves immediately becomes evident in the way that we relate to other people, whether they are intimate friends or social friends or colleagues at work or community members or people we meet on the train or who come to fix the computer. So that is a pretty important connection. And of course, how can we love the God whom we cannot see if we cannot love? So John says, will not love, or does not love, but we should really say cannot love the people that you can see. So listen to this. So meditation works at this integral level of relationship. Even though it is an experience of solitude, because when we meditate together, we are in solitude together. Because I'm not meditating for you, And you're not meditating for me, but we are meditating together. And the result of that is actually something quite remarkably beautiful and a great endorsement of the Christian vision, because it creates community. And we can see that in Christian faith as the body of Christ becoming manifest in and through people who meet together in His name, in the silence of His name. So, solitude is not about withdrawal or isolation, although we all need, maybe some of us more or less than others, times of solitude, times of withdrawal, times on our own. But solitude itself means discovering and facing your uniqueness, which can be quite scary for most people. Because at first it seems as if you're discovering yourself as if you were isolated. But uniqueness, your first glimpse you get of your uniqueness might really quite terrify you. So, but on the other hand, very quickly, it makes you aware that this is not something to be frightened of or run away from. What's the best way of running away from your uniqueness? Go to a shopping mall, and you'll be just like everybody else. Or vote with the majority, or think, dress, eat, think, feel, do the same as everybody else, at least as they seem to be doing. That's the easiest, quickest way to avoid yourself, avoid your uniqueness. But if you do meditate, you will, maybe not in a dramatic way, but you will find your uniqueness, and you will discover that that is actually the basis of relationship. That unless you are in touch with your uniqueness, that solitude, and you're embracing it, your relationships will remain rather superficial, unsatisfying, and a bit lackluster. Most people will say that they notice the effects of meditation at that level of relationships first. In relationship with themselves, I feel more at peace with myself, I can sleep better at night, I can love myself more, I'm more patient with myself, and I find that I'm more loving, more patient, more open to other people, and I can give myself more to other people, and my relationship with God becomes more real in both of those levels of relationship. We don't have a separate relationship with God. We can only meet God in this bigger field of relationship. So let's listen to this. Each human being is like a genie in a bottle. The bottles move about, meet, touch, knock against each other, but without doing any harm to the glass, which is unbreakable. But it can do harm to the being inside, according to the confused impulsions communicated from the inside. Would you like me to read that again? Try and imagine, then we'll act it. You're all too tired? Anyone's too tired, you can go to bed. Each human being is like a genie in a bottle. The bottles move about, meet, touch, knock against each other. It doesn't do any harm to the glass of the bottle because it's unbreakable. But it can do harm to the being inside the bottle because of the confused impulsions communicated from the inside. Okay, so imagine yourself like a little genie in a bottle, and you're moving around, hitting other bottles. And it doesn't break the glass of your persona, the glass of your personality, but it can hurt the person inside because of the strange little messages which are being communicated inside the bottle. So, this is a nice big space, that's why we were led here. So, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. Some of you look as if you really want to. So, stand up and start. Remember, you're a genie in a bottle. You can use the whole room for 2 minutes. Walk around, but first of all, don't. Let's just move into that space then. First of all, let's do it in a way that Leonardo is going to put the camera there and is going to do it. You're not an observer.
I need it.
The genie is like a spirit, like a little thing. So we just move around first of all, and without hitting each other. Right? So it's very easy for English people to do. It's very difficult for Italians. If you walk on an Italian street, you're constantly being knocked. Elisabetta, don't you think so?
Not very much.
It's my experience with Italians, they're always bumping into you. In the English street, you can be in the most crowded Oxford Street, and we always manage to completely avoid any contact at all. So, keep your eyes down, but move around, and we just avoid people. Be aware of how much effort, how much consciousness we're putting in to avoiding each other, avoiding touching each other. We're kind of relating to each other, but really, basically, to avoid contact. So what is the little genie in your bottle telling you? Somebody's coming up on your left. Avoid danger. Like cars, with those modern cars with those alarms that go off and you get too close to the wall. Okay, so let's stop. We're very successful. We've lived our lives without any contact. Okay, now we'll still keeping our eyes down a little bit. We'll walk around, and it doesn't matter if you bump into anyone. Somebody's in your way, you're just pushing them out of your way. Sure. If anybody's enjoying this too much, you better see one of these. The instinct is still cold. Right. You have been noticed. Okay, that big space in the middle. Now we will do the same thing, but on this occasion, without actually violently don't be attacking people. When you hit them or touch them, you look at them. All right? It's a bit artificial, really. You have to remember to look. You have to go on the inside. You have to go on the inside. Now you stop and give a hug to the person next to you. Just one. It's not polygamous.
Did we get any wishes?
People were looking before they touched.
Yeah.
Touching involved.
Interesting. Okay. Well. So I think that's self-evident, doesn't it? Or do you want me to explain what it all means? I think it's quite obvious that different ways in which we interact or limit our level of interactions, different kinds of relationship. I mean, where did the laughter come? Laughter came in the last bit, didn't it, really? It was the joy. If you're really, when we were concentrating on avoiding each other, there wasn't much fun, was there? So, yeah, very serious work, avoiding. So, and what we have to think about is, which isn't so easy to act out, I suppose, is what are those confused impulsions, as if impulses, I think maybe would be a better translation, confused impulses from the little genie in the bottle. Is that how we see ourselves? As a spirit locked up in a body? And that is a certain type of dualistic religious understanding of the human being. We're a ghost in a machine, and death is when you take the cork out of the bottle and the spirit comes out of the bottle and flies up to heaven or wherever. But it isn't actually a Christian understanding of the self or the person. It's much more that the body exists in the spirit. So if you think differently and think of the space we were in and the moving around that we were doing, that is the spirit in whom we live and move and have our being and bump into each other or avoid each other. Because in the spirit that we live our physical and intellectual and artistic and social and psychological lives, in whom we live and move and have our being. So that's the water that we are swimming in like the fish. That's another way of looking at ourselves. And I think it's a way of looking at ourselves that's very different from much of our cultural and social training. Maybe different cultures are closer to it than others, and it's very important for us to, especially in this Easter period, to remember the resurrection. And although the risen body of Jesus is not in the same form, in fact it was not even recognizable to his friends at first, but it's not in the same form as his physical body, it's a body nonetheless. We believe in the resurrection of the body and the life of the world to come. And one of the early teachers of the church was asked, who is closest to God, angels or human beings? And he replied, angels. Angels are closer to God at the moment, but human beings are more like God because they have a body. And that is pure Christian thought, because they have a body. And Jesus is the embodiment of God in whom the fullness of the Godhead dwells embodied. So here is a theology to work on if you want to. You don't have to work on the theology, you can stay at the level of the psychology, but the psychology works, and the theology adds something to the psychology. But